Hello Sarah, today we're going to be discussing what you do at STEAMhouse and who you are and what you mean to STEAMhouse and what you've been doing projects within lockdown. So to start with, can you tell us who you are and what you do within STEAMhouse?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I am Sarah, and I work. I'm one of the technical staff at STEAMhouse, so I mainly work in the workshop facilities, specifically in the materials science workshop. So I work with members directly, mainly consulting on kind of practical elements of projects, helping with product development for kind of soft products development, and just generally helping with kit, equipment, processes, anything to do with the kind of practical realms of business and project development, really.
So how have you been connecting with the STEAMhouse community over the summer?
So I'm really lucky, and I've got a really strong group of members that I work with at STEAMhouse. So I've been lucky enough to stay in contact with quite a lot of them, which has been great because it's just meant that there's still been a community of people still engaging and talking. So we've been running Materials Club, which is a monthly event that happens where about 20 of our members get together, and it's focused on kind of material exploration and developing new materials using abundant waste streams, natural resources, and that kind of area of development. So we've been running that. We've been having speakers attend the sessions to kind of have an inspirational input to help lift everyone. And then it's just been a really nice space to discuss people's problems, any challenges they've had, any things that have gone really well, anything they want to celebrate. Yeah, so that's been one of our main contact points. And then alongside that, I've been working with members individually through video calls and phone calls to try and help continue their development, even though they haven't got access to the physical workshops, to try and think about how they can pivot what they're doing under the current circumstances, and still manage to develop and make some sort of progress. So
What sort of projects, if any, have you been working on?
So alongside the Materials Club, I've also been working on a project called the BioBox project, and that is a 6-week programme, which at the moment is in its first programme. So I've got the first 20 members undertaking the programme. It is in response to not being able to access workshops. So trying to find different ways of still being practical, doing that materials research, developing that research, but from a new standpoint, we're all stuck at home in either a very crowded space or a space where we don't really have the option to get too messy. So the BioBox is in collaboration with Materium, who are an open source recipe platform. So I'm working with one of their leads called Zoe, and the box is a kit that gets sent out to you. It's sustainable, it's all environmentally friendly in terms of packagings, and the ingredients are all natural. And what we are asking members to do is basically to use 2 recipes that we give them and build their own biomaterial samples, and then explore that and experiment with testing those samples in different ways to see whether they are viable options and viable alternatives for materials they might already use in their existing products and practices. So it's kind of taking a disruptive approach to material exploration, and then applying a slightly more scientific and rigorous approach to testing, to try and combine kind of the STEAM ethos into kind of materials development, really.
So could you tell us a little bit more about how this idea came about?
Yeah, so it was, like I said, it was a response to the current situation and wanting to enable members to continue working practically. And then on top of that, it was really about working with Zoe to kind of tackle this issue of materials development only going so far. So there's a lot of amazing work being done using natural ingredients to develop these materials, but the materials aren't necessarily always usable because they maybe aren't waterproof, or they're not strong enough, or they just aren't quite durable enough to stand the test of time. So what we wanted to do is try and look at collecting data that would help support the development of these materials, so that they may become more commercially viable and feasible to swap out for, say, an existing plastic you might use, or a packaging material that you might use that's not so environmentally friendly. Yeah, and then off the back of that, this kind of idea of collecting big data and then open source sharing that to a wider community of researchers, so that they can use some of this information that we're collecting, which will then help them to progress in their own areas of research, and kind of creating that very open approach to materials development is kind of what underpins it all. And the accessibility of the box is also something that really excites me, because it means that not only can a creative get involved, but someone with no prior experience can test this box and start to understand materials in a slightly different way. Or you may even think about engaging scientists and engineers from different backgrounds who can start to think about materials in a much more playful manner, in the same way that a creative would when they start developing something. So that's kind of the where it stems from, and the ambition for the box.
Brilliant. Could you elaborate on any other reasons why biomaterials are important in 2020? I know you mentioned a few.
Yeah, so I think at the moment sustainability and the environment is so prominent in terms of you know, what's being discussed in the news, and it goes right across from certainly my background in textiles and fashion. You know, we are, as an industry, that is the second biggest polluter in the world, behind the oil and petroleum industry. So there is, just in that area, there is a lot of work to do in considering what are the alternatives to the materials that we currently use. And I think plastics and bioplastics are in kind of direct conflict, with plastics, you know, lasting on this earth thousands of years, and bioplastics potentially biodegrading in under 90 days. So that conversation is so open at the moment. And then there is this kind of new area of materials science, which is completely open in terms of who engages with it. So actually you've got a whole new group of designers who are working alongside scientists and engineers, and are actually becoming scientists in their own right in terms of the materials they're developing and working with. And they're not just accepting what we currently have in terms of supply of materials. They're looking at, okay, well, how do we develop our own materials that have a much better economic standpoint, environmental standpoint, and also support health and well-being. So I think it's a really interesting time at the moment. There seems to be a massive shift and a movement towards this idea of rejecting the materials we have around us, and consciously going out to find and understand how we can use our natural resources in a much more safe and longevical way, and it makes sense for the environment and everything else that goes with it, I think.